Welcome, everybody. So we'll jump in and get started because we are hoping to cover a lot of ground. And uh, thank you for your patience ahead of time. Lynn is a real trooper. She and we've actually never met in person, which you might be surprised to find out. But as we've done these chats and we've had such good feedback, we're continuing to offer them. Our format has evolved a little bit, as you probably noticed, and it's fun to be able to offer some slides and go into things more in detail. But sometimes I'll just give Lynn a really loose thread on what we're going to talk about. And she kind of runs with the ball. So what we're hoping to do here is I would like to talk about the motivation and the information behind my new book that just came out, 33 Strength and Fitness Workouts for Horses, and the physiological needs that horses do have to use their bodies in a hard or vigorous manner on occasion. And then what I'm hoping to do is kind of hand things over to Lynn to flesh out the discussion, because obviously when we talk about um, working horses hard, quote unquote, we don't want this to skew towards piling more stress on their lives or causing them hardship or breaking them down. Like, it should be an additive process, not something that depletes the horse or, as I said, causes them stress, anxiety, etc. So I'm hoping Lynn can, steer us towards some good info and takeaway tips on how to read the horse as we're maybe trying to implement some of what I cover. Anyway, I see that you're signed on there, Lynn. How is your audio working? How are you?
Think so. Am I sounding okay over there? All
Yeah, all good. Great.
right, we're good to go.
Okay, super. So you have the slides. Yeah, do you want to bring up the first one?
Sure.
Okay. So what I want to start out with is to underscore all of what I'm going to cover with the reminder of things that Lynn and I have talked about in the past. So that being, we can't even talk about improving horses through exercise. And when I say improving, I really do mean improving their life. I know I'm sort of a vigilante about this, but so many systems in the horse are dependent on them carrying a baseline of fitness. Everything from their hoof growth, their immunity, secretions from their lungs, so they're keeping the airways open and healthy and thriving. Gut motility is hugely tied to exercise and fitness of the back muscles. A good respiration is affected by the tone and looseness of those lower back muscles where the diaphragm connects. There's just so many systems in the horse's body that are dependent on fitness. So that's partly just for their general wellness, like never mind whatever sport you're doing. So that's where I'm coming from. Now, that all said, like, we can't talk about improving them through exercise unless we remember the things that Lynn and I have previously chatted about, which is ensuring that they have a lifestyle, like their daily living, how they are housed and cared for. To me, that trumps everything. So if a horse is in a high anxiety state because of their living situation, obviously that's going to affect negatively everything that we try to do with offering them positive gains through exercise. So we're not going to go into that here because we have other good chats that you can go back and listen to about how to make sure that you have a nice rewarding environment for them. But I just wanted to remind you that I'm not overlooking that. I think that's where we start from. Assuming they have a good living environment, then let's talk about their physiological needs. So there's the new book, which is now available widely. And so let's go to the next slide. I want to, and I'll post these links below in the notes, but there's two studies in particular that I'll kind of reference throughout here. The first one was done by Michigan State University, and they just put out such great material. The research there is just top notch. It was a 30-year study, or it was 30 years of study that culminated in a paper that came out last year, 2023. And it's titled A Review of 3 Decades of Research Dedicated to Making Equine Bones Stronger, Implications for Horses and Humans. And I'll post a link. You can read the paper in full. What's interesting about those 30 years of study is that the study started as looking at nutrients and minerals and nutrition, because what was observed mainly in racehorse settings, so we're extrapolating a little bit, but we have to sort of go with the only research we have available, and a lot of it does come out of the racehorse industry. But what they were noticing is that when young horses were brought in from the fields for training, they were routinely getting lower limb injuries. And that's not uncommon with the other sports. I certainly have seen it a lot in dressage, or just even youngsters just getting broke to ride, that sort of thing. And what the vets and researchers working on these studies discovered was that the cannon bone mass in these young horses was actually reducing. And this was consistent, like year after year after year. They bring these horses in from the field, put them in training, which is where you would think they would be adding bone, because we do know that positive stress leads to bone remodeling. But the opposite was happening. They were losing bone. And so the study started as a way to explore, like, maybe the diet is the issue. What sort of minerals might be lacking? What do these horses need? And over time, and certainly nutrition is a part. And again, we're not going to go down that wormhole here today. Certainly diet is a part. But what happened was these researchers realized the reason these horses were losing bone was because of their lifestyle change. So they were being brought in from being in a field where, as youngsters, they typically are exposed to doses of high voltage exercise. You know, youngsters play and they run hard and they have fun and they rip around and they work them without our intervention. They work themselves hard. When we bring them into typically a stall situation or even small paddocks, we've reduced considerably just the natural dosage of exercise that they get, even though we begin training them and we offer them some type of structure daily. And so the researchers realized they really needed to start studying that aspect, that exercise piece. And so over the past 30 years, what they've determined, or believe they've determined, is that horses really do need short doses of really high speed exercises. Not necessarily high concussion, but firm ground is not something to fear and run away from. But point being that horses do, there's something about that high intensity for not a ton of time. Again, they think that within any given week, if a horse has about a couple hundred meters dosage of this high speed, that is what their bones need to keep remodeling and increasing in size and strength rather than decreasing. And it's interesting because that really does parallel the human research as well. So doses of high intensity exercise are important for the overall physiological. But again, these are short doses. You do not need to go gallop your horse for miles and miles and miles. But anyway, this is some of the information that really motivated me to write the book, because we all need guardrails, right? Because many of us worry about overdoing things with our horse, and certainly we don't want to break them down. But if we avoid hard exercise because we either think the horse doesn't like it, or maybe it's physically harmful, in some ways we're doing them a disservice. So that's the first study that I'll post a link for. And then the second one is on my blog. It's a heart rate study. And I think I've talked about heart rate zones in here before. Basically, Polar, which is a heart monitor company, did a number of studies, and they're the best ones I've seen actually so far. And trying to define different aerobic zones for horses, which I think is highly useful because, interestingly, Grand Prix, a batch of 16 or 20 Grand Prix dressage horses, were their heart rates were monitored during competition. So add all the stress and the noise and chaos of horse showing at the highest level. And those horses' heart rates never got above 115. Now, that is a very light, it's considered a very light aerobic zone, like it's super low. And those are horses the highest level. So We can sort of guess that horses at lower level dressage are rarely working at a heart rate above 110 beats per minute. And again, this data was gathered with the horses wearing heart monitors under their girth with sensors that read out in real time on a watch that the rider wears. So over the past few years, similar to the speed study I referenced earlier, it has been determined that horses benefit quite a bit from, again, small, not extensive, small doses of exercise at a heart rate over 150 beats per minute. So anywhere from 150 beats a minute on up to their maximum, which for most horses is, 180 to 200 beats a minute. Now, that's pretty high for most horses, especially if they're pretty, young. Let's say you have a 10-year-old horse, prime of their life. It takes a lot to get a horse up into that range. It would be a hard gallop, maybe a steep hill that you climb on a trail ride, these sorts of things. Now, what seems to happen in that heart rate zone is improved blood delivery to the muscles. So the systems that push the blood to the muscles and then clear out all what I call the junk, but the metabolic waste that is produced during exercise. So basically, it improves the circulation system of working muscles. And anecdotally, in the equine fitness world, we also believe that those higher intensity doses of exercise improve neuromuscular connection. So, repeated muscular contractions over time, the nerve signals can become a little bit dim or diminished. And to keep everything firing the way we want it to, we need to either add some novel exercise, some cross training, or interject some hard doses of exercise to get the horse into that intense level that improves the circulatory delivery of blood and oxygen to muscles, as well as the neuromuscular connections. So these are just some important studies, new stuff coming out all the time, really worth opening our minds to. Let's move on to the next slide, please. And then we'll kind of look at, how this might play out. So this is me on a young warm blood mare. And I have this little track that I put in my pasture. It's nothing fancy. It's just an area that does allow me to get the horses up to a little bit of speed. Now, this comes with a caveat. I am by no means a bold, emblazoned rider. I never took to jumping, so I like to keep 4 feet on the floor. But nonetheless, I have really learned the value of horses getting up to speed and being able to use their bodies that way, as well as mentally to be able to tolerate that and not boil over. So this is me just out in the field, asking for a brisk tempo. And just an example, I think of a horse that seems pretty content. She has a nice relaxed ear posture and her tail is relaxed. It's not held stiffly or swishing away from the body, and just a very a pleasant expression. So I really do believe that horses, if it's done correctly, that horses can thrive and learn to enjoy hard exercise again, but it's having parameters for that, obviously. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. So this mare, I think I have 3 slides in a row of this mare. So this was a training mare, and in this photo, we see, I like to post pictures of myself so people don't think I'm picking on other people. So we see a lot of tension in this horse's top line. She has a relaxed facial expression, but this horse, you can see how close together her back legs are. So that indicates kind of a choppy stride behind. She's not really driving under with the hind legs. So this was a mare who did carry quite a bit of stiffness. You could see she's tense in the top line, which causes her to go with sort of a raised neck position. And her back is a little bit hollow. And again, these photos were taken in a lesson with Dr. Garrett Heuschman, who does advocate quite a bit of doing a little bit of galloping in your lessons. And again, if you can get the muscles to have just better blood and oxygen, I know that sounds simple, but to be honest, forget about all the dressage cues I could do right now to try to get this mare's head down and get her on the bit. If we just talk about, can I offer the right voltage of exercise to maybe improve the feeling of her muscles right now? What might that look like? And can that happen maybe without undue hardship for the horse? So let's go to the next one in this sequence. So here again, this is in a lesson, and Dr. Hoishman was telling me, like, no, really make her go, because like I say, I'm not the boldest rider on the planet. So I was like, well, I am going. And he's like, no, go faster. And you can see a moment here of tension in the horse. The horse is, her ears are back. She's not super psyched, and I'm pushing my hands forward to make sure I don't grab her in the mouth. I admittedly, I threw equitation out the window here. It's just, I'm off her back, my hands are forward. It's like, we just need to go. The motivation, the goal right now is just giving you this dose of vigorous exercise. I'm not going to restrain your head or require you to be in any kind of posture. And again, this did not go on forever. This was maybe a total of 60 seconds, but this photo came out of it. So I thought it would be a useful one, because maybe you all have found yourself in these situations before. And then we'll go to the next slide. And then we have, again, this is like maybe a minute later. I'm coming around the short end of the arena here. And now you can see the horse really starting to change the look about her face, her ear position, as well as now the reins are, I don't even know if I'm holding them. I think maybe I'm holding them with my outside rein, but really loose. And all that tension from the neck has started to relax and come down. And there's more a feeling of fluidity about her body. And these are the critical moments in training where we can start to unlock the horse's body. But even if a horse's body isn't locked up, I think this sequence of photos shows the importance of a short, purposeful dose of vigorous exercise for improving the state of the muscles. Okay, so do we have one or two more photos, Lynn?
Yes.
Okay, right. Okay, so um, now some people, again, what if you don't have enough terrain? Like if you have a barn that's, landlocked, and you don't have a big arena, and you don't have the ability to like move your horse out at speed. There are ways to interject novelty, as I mentioned before. And Lynn and I have covered this a lot in our previous chats, but keeping the horse curious, keeping them engaged, that also improves neuromuscular connections. It is also, I find, if people are, I'll cue Lynn up a little bit, and if she wants to carry this thread on, she can, but doesn't have to. But, when people, they'll get worried, especially if they have a horse that's been rehabbing from an injury. Giving horses these vigorous doses of exercise can be intimidating or scary. Like, you don't want to go break your horse again, right? You just got over the being broken. And that's totally fair, but sometimes people get stuck in that quagmire and they're not able to make forward progress. So one of the things I usually suggest people do, if you're in this mode where you're like, I've started to ask for a little bit more intensity every, 10 days or so, and I think it's going well, but I'm not really sure how it's going. I always just encourage people to interject some play into their daily or weekly routine. Like if you feel like your workout sequence with your horse has become a slave drill, then, I mean, it probably hasn't. I think most of us are harder on ourselves than we should be. But you know what? Just interject some play. And if the horse is showing up and they're engaging with obstacles, if that's your thing, or some kind of cross training, and their expression is bright and they're on board, then I'd say you're doing a really good, things are looking fine. If you present a horse with, an opportunity that normally would kind of perk him up or be playful, and they're shut down and sour, the lights aren't on, then I think generally that is a place where you could say, oh, maybe my intervals I started to introduce were too long, or maybe my horse wasn't fit enough to start adding that level of intensity. Because the thing with this hard exercise that I'm talking about is you don't start with a couch potato. We are talking about horses that at least have a baseline of fitness, right? They've been working at least 6 to 8 weeks regularly. That's the only time it's appropriate to start talking about intensity. Okay, and then I think, is that my last slide, Lynn?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So I think I can pick up a little bit from here, and and apropos to the play part, if you have a horse who's looking like they're not engaged or disconnected, play and curiosity are great ways to get them re-engaged. Agility is particularly good because you combine the idea of play, the communication, and also often the curiosity and investigative behavior that goes with an obstacle. So that can be a really good interlude, or just an interlude in amongst other things that you might be doing. So you and I had talked about balancing the physical and emotional needs,
Mhm.
and really the two are so intertwined that if, as we're working, we sense a horse is becoming tense or resistant, we can be pretty sure he's on the way to being stressed and anxious. Conversely, if he's feeling relaxed and balanced and focused, then we're pretty sure that he is motivated and feeling pretty confident about what he's doing. Um, when in doubt, one of the important things to do is watch for the calming signals. And you and I had a whole program on calming signals a while back. In fact, I think that was our most watched, most popular of our chats, because the calming signals, they don't say that the horse is already stressed, but that's the horse saying, I'm not so sure about where things are. I think I might need this sort of stress warning, um, an indication that we should pause and assess. And the tricky thing about calming signals is that they're behaviors that can mean multiple things. So I won't go through the whole list because we did have the whole other program on it. But the important point is that calming signals can mean multiple things. And when you know your horse, you know what to look for. You know what his calming signals are likely to be. And that says, oh, let's recheck whether we're pushing a little too hard or maybe he's confused. Because, we don't want to get into that tense and reactive stage where it's not fun. So I think one of the things that we want to look for in that harder work that you're describing is what makes the horse get engaged in that work, what makes him want to do that work and then want to continue the work. And anything that's inherently reinforcing is going to support that work and support the horse's interest in it. It starts with a trusting relationship with the rider. You don't have to have a long-term relationship, but he needs to trust that you're not going to push him too hard and that you're going to listen if he says, no, I really don't understand this, or no, I really can't do this. And you want to do the training in a way that builds their confidence. Like, yeah, I get this, I can do it. And ideally, have work the horse likes to do, give him a sense of purpose, and make sure the work's comfortable. So let's take a little look at each of these. And remember that horses don't come with a built-in work ethic. Nature says conserve energy. So it's our job to motivate, and get a high energy horse like Ricky, the thoroughbred on the left. They may be a lot easier to motivate than a horse like Shiloh here, whose favorite gait is halt. So the training, the way that we go about the training, can invite the horse to want to work. When they feel confident, then they feel proud of what they've learned. And I think this is something that's been very much overlooked. But when I posted this chat on my Facebook page, I was surprised how many people immediately said, my horse likes to work because he's proud of what he knows how to do. Or he likes feeling appreciated. He knows that we appreciate his willingness to work. So these are a couple of combined driving ponies who have to do a variety of hard work in the marathon phase, very intricate work in the dressage and cones phases, and they're trained in a way that they understand each step of the way, and each step of the way they have this manner of, I get it, I can do it. I did it. I'm proud of myself. And a job the horse likes. This is Oops, who never refused to jump in his entire life. And then we have horses who love to work cows. The endurance horses whose main thought is, there's a horse ahead of me, I'm going to get in front of that horse. And it's fun to trail ride with people who have endurance horses. That can get quite entertaining. So if we ask a horse to do something he's not enjoying, it's going to be harder to motivate him. And a sense of purpose. Most everybody agrees that if you ask a horse to just do the same things over and over in a ring, he's not likely to be very enthusiastic and not likely to learn well. And your image of the bay mare that you had out in the field, where you've given her big scope to move, but also obstacles, natural obstacles, really help a horse pay attention to what they're doing with their feet. I know you've talked a lot, Jack, about using natural terrain to help horses get fit. And anything you do in the ring, if you do the same thing, if you need to gallop a horse for a certain distance and all you can do is revolve around in circles in a ring, I'm guessing that that's not really going to provide even the same physical benefit, because his mind is not going to be in the same place as it would be if he's out galloping across a big field, where he can relax better and see the open space in front that lets him really move. And we really need to be careful about the constraints and the discomfort that are so common, people overlook them. This horse can't be relaxed and going forward. This horse isn't going to be able to work hard. It may be hard work in the sense of uncomfortable work, but this doesn't look like hard fitness work. Anytime we constrain a horse, I just saw a presentation by Dr. Steve Peters, the neurologist who's also a horse person, and he very much emphasized this. When a horse is constrained, it does all sorts of bad things to his brain and his body, and they need the freedom to move forward without constraint. And there's so many constraints that people don't think of. Ill-fitting equipment is going to change how a horse moves in order to avoid the discomfort. Riders who don't move with the horse, and this is something, sadly, that I see a lot of, riders who don't ride well enough to stay in balance with the horse. If you can't balance with your horse, then your horse has to compensate for you. And if you can't move with your horse, if you can't synchronize with the horse, then your horse has that discomfort of feeling like the oppositional body against his all the time that he's moving. And being off balance, of course, means the horse has to compensate for the rider. And the worst thing people can do is nagging and drilling. This is what I think I picture you're talking about, Jack. This horse has room to move.
Yeah.
Rider in this case is up off his back, like you were doing with that mare in your first photo of her. Loose rein and really giving this horse scope to move, and he's able to carry his head where he's comfortable carrying it at this point and step out. And now in this one, you're not up out of the saddle like you were in your first one, like that rider was. You're sitting in the saddle, but you move with your horse. And this was something else Dr. Peters talked about, is horses love when your body synchronizes with their body. So as they're moving and you're moving with them, he said physically and emotionally, this is very, very positive and very motivating to a horse. And never underestimate the motivation of a horse who really wants to please you. This is something people have said over and over again. My horse is willing to work hard because he knows I really, really appreciate him. So and you probably recognize Fuego, the PRE stallion who did that marvelous freestyle at the World Equestrian Games some years ago. And we can see here, he's relaxed, he's balanced, he's focused, and you can tell that this horse was motivated and confident in everything that he was doing. So, all right, most of us are not taking our horses to the World Equestrian Games, but we can still look for that same attitude in our horses, where they're feeling proud. I can do it. I understand what you're asking. I can do it. And then I'd like to come back to what you were talking about earlier, Jack, about the horses, about the small intervals. So when you talk about these small intervals, this is so similar then to what horses naturally do. So where you started with the youngsters out at play in pasture, and they do a big burst of speed, and we're thinking, gee, you didn't do any warm up before you galloped yourself across the pasture, did a sliding stop to come up 2 inches in front of the fence, and play that game of let's give everybody heart failure. But that's what they naturally do when they're out there at play on their own.
Yes.
So those bursts of speed that you're talking about so much mimic what they would naturally do that I think that helps horses feel like, okay, you get me. You're asking me to do things that feel right and natural to me.
You know, that's a good point to put it that way. And yeah, thanks for bringing that point up, because I did want to go back to that. There is some speculation from that 30-year study that if horses have, free 24/7 access to pasture, they might get those doses of speed on their own, especially if they live in a playful herd. But I think most of us don't have that type of acreage where their horses turned out, or if we do, there's the real possibility that it's buried under snow 6 months out of the year. So there are those considerations. But certainly horses who do live very naturally in a, kind of young active herd, it is possible they do receive those small doses of vigorous activity, like you just mentioned, on their own.
And even as they get older, I think they can enjoy a certain amount of that. One of my husband's favorite memories of his first mare was the time that they went riding when the snow was fairly deep, but she loved snow. And they had a canter through the snow where she had to do a collected canter to go through the snow. And so the snow was flying, and she was working very hard and collecting herself, but she was having fun. And anytime we can make these, offer these situations where it feels good to the horse, that's surely that's a connection as well as a positive thing for them physically.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you have more, Lynn, or is that your last slide?
No,
We have 6 minutes.
those were the slides I had, and I was
I love the reminder about calming signals. And again, just a reminder to kind of pay attention to our horse. And I also love the example you just gave about the snow, because my takeaway is that horses, can and do and cultivate this, I'll use the word pride or proud in their hard efforts, because I have seen it over and over and over, no matter what, a reining horse or some of these endurance horses, or that dressage photo you showed, which was just lovely. I've seen it, so I know it to be true. Now, that's not always everybody's experience, especially if you don't have a horse from the time they're young. They can show up with a lot of baggage you got to unwind until you can get there. And I understand that. But I love the example you gave about the snow, because there's one of those examples where if you find maybe what does motivate the horse, because I remember living in Vermont, going through that snow is hard work. Those horses got their heart rates up, and some of them were more into it than others. But that was just this natural way to sneak in this high voltage exercise like I'm talking about. And who would have thought that was the thing for your horse, but it was. And we talk a lot about trail riding. Now, that may not be every horse's cup of tea. Chasing cows isn't every horse's cup of tea, but there's so many different things I think that you can try that do have these short doses of vigorous activity built into them. And that is the key, I think, is to kind of listen to your horse, think outside the box, and then to go back to the calming signals. Those are cool ones to just watch out for. I have a horse right now, an Arabian, and he's making good progress. But he does sometimes, like when we're, trotting, getting around, especially when he's online and we go over the cavalettis and he's starting to kind of blow through his nose and let go a little bit. He'll slam on the brakes and rub his nose on his right front foot. And then off we go again. And that's my signal. Like, okay, all right, there it is. There's his calming signal. And that tells me, I think, that I'm right at the edge of him like making a physical breakthrough, or I could push it and push too far. You know what I mean? It tells me I'm like right on a bubble there. But anyway, I think it's just fun and useful things to look out for. Yeah. Any last minute comments you want to make here in the few minutes we have left, Lynn?
Well, I think your point about the calming signal there, that's so apropos. When he gives you that signal, then you are recognizing that and saying, okay, I don't want to push him further. It doesn't mean we necessarily change something we do, but we want to be aware and maybe give him that pause moment, or just say, okay, that was far enough. We want to shift gears here. But the calming signals can be a really powerful way to get feedback from the horse on how they're feeling about what we're doing, and making sure we keep it positive. I mean, there's going to be negative things they're going to go on the negative side of things occasionally, but we just don't want to spend any more time there than we have to.
Yeah, and I think the takeaway, is that, because you maybe observe a calming signal in a certain situation, doesn't necessarily mean, oh, okay, all exercise or maybe this level of exercise is bad for my horse. It may just be, there's so many different stimuli associated with different postures and surfaces and arena settings, right? So it doesn't mean, oh, skip the exercise or skip hard exercise. It might mean just try something else, or like you said, maybe just give the horse a short pause. Yeah.
And that pause is a time when a horse is learning too. That pause is time for his body and his brain to process what he's just done, how it's felt, and that then becomes much stronger in his memory, because he's had that time to process it before you move on. Much more effective than saying, oh, let's repeat that to reinforce it. That doesn't reinforce it nearly as well as giving him time to think about what he just did.
That's a useful, yeah, that is a useful place to end up, I think. Very important. This was super fun, Lynn. This was a fun topic. And God, we packed a lot in. So, as usual, feel free to drop questions below in the YouTube chat. And Lynn and I do our best to check in periodically and to answer those for y'all. And you can suggest future topics there as well if you wish. Um, well, it was great to see you again, Lynn, and we'll get another chat scheduled.
Yep, I think we'll be back in September, right?
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, take care until then. This was fun.